Hi, my name is Gibson, and I'm the co-owner and creator of the Personal Development School. This is your daily breakthrough video, and in this video, I'm going to talk to you about the relationship shadow of the anxious, preoccupied, attachment style individual. So this is like one of my favorite topics. I don't talk about this enough on the YouTube channel, just for how powerful this work is. But if you're not familiar, what I'm going to do, I have a couple of other previous videos around this, and there's so much to say about this, and there's so much deep diving to do around the topic of shadow work. But I really want to put it into the context of like the relationship shadow of different individuals. And so what I'm going to take you through is just a very high level overview of what shadow work is. And then I'm going to talk to you about how it's sort of what it's telling us when we have like a trigger that's literally about our shadow and what we can do with this specifically in the context of the anxious, preoccupied individual. So if you are curious at all at any point about shadow work and you go through this video and you're like, oh my goodness, shadow work's so exciting, I have like one of the most in-depth courses in shadow work that you'll probably find. We had somebody say the other day, which was like such a beautiful compliment that I'm so grateful for, that in their 20 years of doing shadow work, this was the best course that they found on the topic. And it's a very in-depth course, and it will take you through everything in terms of integrating your shadow, reprogramming the repressed traits you have within yourself. So we're going to talk a lot in this video about what shadow work is and how it might specifically apply to the anxious, preoccupied individual. So if you want to join in the school, coupon code with you, 25% off of our membership bundles for all access pass. And I'll put a link in the description box below, as well as a card on this channel to direct you over there. So our shadow, the whole idea of a shadow and shadow work was something developed by Carl Jung. And he talks about how the shadow is the part of ourselves that we try to deny or hide. But really what's happened is throughout the course of our lives, we learn through the process of classical conditioning, through the system of socialization, right? We get punished and rewarded, and we learn that certain aspects of self are worthy of punishment. And so we build in negative emotional associations to those parts of ourselves. Maybe as a child, you're too loud when your parents are napping, or if you have a parent that works night shift and they sleep during the day, and maybe you get punished for your loudness. And so you learn, oh, this part of me is bad and is shameful and gets me punished. So I repress my loudness and my self-expression and my outgoingness, and maybe I become a more quiet version of myself, right? This is just an example of somebody I spoke with once that comes to mind. So we learn that parts of ourselves are bad, and we build in negative emotional associations to these parts of ourselves. And as a byproduct, to try to cope and fit into society, what we do is we repress the parts of ourselves that we've been conditioned to believe are negative. And it doesn't just have to be through direct punishment. It can be through things you see in other people's lives. Maybe you see people being shamed for a certain behavior. Maybe you see in your church or in your community or in your friend group growing up, there are things that people are being shamed for, and you're like, oh my goodness, I don't want to feel that shame. So you repress those traits or qualities within yourself that might be natural to you in advance. And they don't just have to be traits. They can be desires. They can be needs. And so as a byproduct of this experience, guess what happens? Well, if you've deemed parts of yourself as worthy of being exiled and unworthy of being shown or seen by anybody else, well, what do you think happens to your self-worth? You've made parts of you bad. And so the denser our shadow, the lower our self-worth as a general correlation. And so when we look at shadow work, you can think of your shadow as being the traits within you that you've basically exiled and repressed into the subconscious, and you're super afraid to express. But some of these things can be really important things. They can be like creativity. Maybe you learned, oh, creativity won't make you any money. Maybe you learned that your emotions were bad. Your sensitivity was bad. Especially a lot of men obviously get very, emotionally shamed quite often. So as a byproduct of all of this, there can be so many different traits. And in the shadow work course in the school, we have literally like an entire trait list of both positive traits and negative traits, even though there's not really one such thing or another. But to notice based on, collective conditioning at the societal level. And the goal is to integrate these traits back into the whole. You don't have to like overexpress them, but we want trait harmony. We want balance and equilibrium. And so what happens is until we get that, when somebody else expresses those traits outside of us, we are either really attracted to them or we're really bothered by them. And so either way, the expression of a trait in somebody else, it's a repression of a trait within us, is essentially letting us know that we're in disharmony within our psyche, within ourselves. And so those things will have power on us and power over us until we do the work. So you can think of these things as not just impacting your self-esteem, but also impacting, how much you're attracted to others, because literally one of the 3 major markers, and I have a full video about this somewhere else in here if you want to search it, but one of the 3 major markers of what constitutes attraction in individuals is because our subconscious is so seeking wholeness. If somebody is expressing a trait that we're repressing, we are often very attracted to it. Okay, so if somebody's expressing that outgoingness or that loudness that you once suppressed, you're attracted to it because your subconscious is actually seeking wholeness through another person. And when people are in a relationship and 2 become 1 in a relationship, that's a way that it's a strategy the subconscious will use to try to derive wholeness. So when it comes to shadows in relationships, specifically for the anxious preoccupied, what you'll see here is that often the things that anxious preoccupied individuals are attracted to, their relationship shadow, are often things that they're repressing within themselves, and that's part of that attraction and pull. And so this is part of why you see the anxious and dismissive dynamic so often, right? Because they each carry the shadow of each other within the relationship in its wholeness, right? So for example, you'll see that the anxious preoccupied often represses selfishness, right? They often repress the idea of like taking themselves into consideration. They often repress, and we need like a healthy balance of selfishness, not because we need to be selfish or selfless, but because we need to treat the ideal outcome or output is that you take yourself in equal consideration to other people. We treat people as a part of ourselves, but not as higher or lower than ourselves. We're really looking for that equality, that homeostasis as much as possible for healthy relationships to function. And so when anxious preoccupieds are usually putting their partner's needs so high, or others' needs so high above themselves, and it's they want to people please so they can get a different need met for social or emotional connection a lot of the time. But in doing that, they stop taking themselves into consideration. So people who are really good with boundaries, people who are not people pleasing, people who are take themselves into consideration, express the trait of selfishness. This is so attractive to an anxious preoccupied individual. And I'm sure if you are anxious and you're listening to this, you've probably had an experience before of being really drawn to somebody who like doesn't show up 100% or treat you in like the way that you would like to be treated in a relationship, but there's this sort of like pull in the curiosity and the need or desire to try to win that person's approval, right? And so there's that pull that takes you in, and it's actually at a deeper level your subconscious seeking wholeness. So all of these things, right, are strategies that the anxious preoccupied individual uses in their relationships to avoid core wounds and pain points. They don't want to feel disliked or excluded or not belonging or unworthy. But the funny thing is, we are attracted to what we repress because the subconscious mind seeks out wholeness. And so until we make these traits acceptable in us, until we love them in us and make space for them, we will keep being attracted to them outside of us. And so if you find yourself in a position where you're like, oh, why do I keep choosing this type of person? Or why do I keep going into this type of relationship? Or why am I always attracted to this type of character or archetype? Well, largely it's because that's telling you something. Those are golden nuggets. And so what you want to recognize, okay, and this can be in like a pretty quick interaction, you can start having these pulls of attraction. Why? Because your conscious mind is processing roughly 40 to 60 bits of data per second, and your conscious mind is processing roughly 40 to 60 bits per second of data, and your subconscious is processing up to 1 billion bits per second of data. So in an initial interaction, the way somebody's speaking to you in a text message, the how long they take to get back to you, an initial 4-minute conversation or 1-minute conversation at a bar, their body language, their micro expressions, their tone of voice, their amount of eye contact, all of these different things are giving you so much information that you're not necessarily consciously aware of, but your subconscious is like, ooh. And so you get pulled into those dynamics out of this place, which is kind of like this really I don't know, exciting, interesting thing to think about, because what you can actually do with this is you can look into yourself and go, okay, what are the qualities of all the past relationships I've had? What are the qualities that in different individuals I end up dating? And how are these things like related to things that I have to actually bring into harmony within the relationship to myself? How do I actually bring in a certain amount of dismissing the external world so I can focus on myself equally? How do I bring in a certain amount of loyalty to my own feelings at social gatherings instead of feeling like I have to be on and people pleasing and connect with everybody so much? And just, if I'm feeling tired, just show up and be tired, you know? And so what I want you to do with all of this, I feel like I'm sometimes when I get excited about certain topics, I know I talk a little faster and I go off on tangents a little more, so I apologize. But what I want you to do with this is I want you to make a list, and I want you to ask yourself, are there any qualities in the past few people that I've dated, especially in the more serious relationships, or the archetype of person that I find myself constantly attracted to? And what qualities are those? And are those qualities in harmony within myself, or are they repressed? Or am I not perceptually recognizing that I have them? So it can also be, for example, like our golden shadow, and maybe I'll do a whole separate video about that, but it can be that you see qualities in somebody else and you really like them, but it can be like you're just not recognizing that you have those qualities as well, which is a form of repression anyways. But either way, those traits are going to tell you something very powerful and important about yourself. And then what I want you to do is create a strategy. What's a strategy to start practicing this on a daily basis and showing up for this? And if you do this repetitively enough, you're reprogramming. And so there's a tremendous amount of very in-depth, like, that will save you time and energy and just get you to the root level inside of our shadow work course. So you can always just do a deep dive into that. But this is an amazing place to get started. And remember too, our shadow can also take place in the form of our needs or desires, but that's sort of like a whole separate video. So thank you for watching. Thank you for being here. I hope this has been helpful. Please like, share, and subscribe if you're getting a lot of value out of this video, and I will see you in the next one.